Honestly, man, she's been killing the vibe all night. I already told her to leave. He said it loud enough for me to hear from across the room. I want you to understand the specific geography of that moment. I was at the bar, the open bar I had booked, at the venue I had found, for the party I had planned, the guest list I had assembled, the invitations I had sent. I was 7 feet away, turned slightly toward the bartender, reaching for the champagne flute I had just been handed. His back was to me, mostly. Enough that he hadn't seen me standing there. Not enough that there was any ambiguity about what I heard. He was talking to his friend Marcus. I have known Marcus for 9 years, which is the length of my marriage to Greg, and in those 9 years Marcus has always been the specific type of man who would have looked up at that moment and seen me standing there and not said a thing. He looked up. He saw me. He did not say a thing. I picked up my champagne. I turned to look at my husband. He turned, registered me, and his face did something I have seen it do before in other contexts, the rapid recalibration of a man who has been caught saying something and is deciding, in real time, whether to acknowledge it or proceed as though it wasn't said. He chose proceed. Hey, he said. I was just telling Marcus the thing about the venue being double booked. It worked out though, right? It was not a story about a double booking. There had been no double booking. That sentence had not been the end of one story and the beginning of another. It had been one complete sentence, standing alone, in my husband's voice, about me. I smiled. I picked up my phone. I walked out to the parking lot. Before I tell you what I did in the parking lot, I need to give you some context, because the story is more interesting with it and also because I am 37 years old and I have been carrying this context for the better part of a decade and it would feel like a waste not to finally say it out loud. My name is Kate. I have been married to Greg for 9 years. We met when I was 28, I was working in event planning, which will become relevant shortly, and he was in sales, which tells you most of what you need to know, and the early years of the marriage were the kind of early years that make it impossible to imagine the later years. They were good. I want to be clear about that because stories like this one can imply that the whole thing was always wrong, and it wasn't. The early years were genuinely good, in ways that I have spent the last 3 years slowly understanding were good specifically because I was still in the process of becoming invisible, and invisibility has a honeymoon period before it becomes a problem. What I mean is, in the early years, Greg valued what I brought. Not just financially, though financially, yes, and I'll get to that, but in terms of capability. I was good at things he wasn't good at, organizing, planning, reading rooms, managing the social infrastructure of a life. He was charming and ambitious and socially easy in ways I was less naturally so, and we covered each other's gaps, which is how good marriages work in the beginning. What happened over 9 years, slowly enough that I missed it while it was happening, was that my contributions became invisible while his remained visible. His salary, his promotions, his social triumphs, these remain named, counted, credited. My salary, which was comparable in most years and significantly higher in several, my organizational labor, my planning, my management of the administrative and social architecture of our life together, these became the background. The water we swam in. Things Greg could rely on so completely that he stopped noticing they required someone to do them. By the time we were 7 years in, I had become what I can only describe as the infrastructure of his life. Not a partner. Infrastructure. And infrastructure, as any civil engineer will tell you, only gets noticed when it fails. I had not yet failed. I was, in fact, in the middle of succeeding spectacularly, having spent 3 months planning a 40th birthday party for a man who had just told his friend, in front of 40 of his closest friends and colleagues, that I was killing the vibe and he'd already told me to leave. I stood in the parking lot on a Friday evening in October and I looked at my phone. I had 4 apps open. The venue booking, which I'd made through their portal. The catering company, which I'd contracted separately. The florist, who had been paid a deposit with a balance due at event completion. The photographer, who was inside right now, photographing my husband's party. My credit card. My planning. My calls and emails and decisions and deposits. She's been killing the vibe all night. I opened the venue app. Here is what I need to tell you about the financial reality of that party before I tell you what I did with it, because the numbers matter and because I think too many stories like this skip over the numbers in favor of the emotion, and the numbers are part of the emotion. The venue, $3,400. Booked 6 weeks ago, deposit paid immediately, balance due at event end. My card. I had suggested splitting it when I booked it. Greg had said sure, remind me, and I had not reminded him, and he had not remembered, and I had paid the deposit alone and was going to pay the balance alone, and I had made a mental note, 2 weeks ago, to remind him this time. I had not yet reminded him. The catering, $2,800 for a 3-hour open bar and past appetizers. Paid in full at booking because the company required it and also because I am the kind of person who likes to have things settled. My card. The florist, $680 deposit on $1,100 total. Balance of $420 due at event completion. The centerpieces on every table right now, the ones people were complimenting, were on a balance that had not yet been collected. My card, at event end. The photographer, $1,500, paid in full at booking. Currently inside, taking photographs of a party I was apparently no longer welcome at. My card. The birthday cake, ordered from a bakery that required full payment at order, $280. My card. The custom invitation printing, which Greg had said was unnecessary and I had done anyway because I find details important, $145. My card. Total, $8,905 and change. Not counting my time, which if I billed it at my professional hourly rate would add another several $1,000s, but which I was going to leave off the accounting because I am generally not petty and also because it would complicate the story I was trying to tell myself, which was that this was simple and clean and already decided. I stood in the parking lot. I looked at the venue app. I thought about what she's been killing the vibe all night meant in the context of a woman who had spent 3 months and nearly $9,000 ensuring there was a vibe to kill. Then I called the venue manager. Her name was Andrea, and she answered on the second ring with the professional brightness of someone expecting a vendor call rather than whatever this was. "Hi, Andrea," I said. "It's Kate Mercer. I'm the booking contact for the Mercer party tonight." "Oh, hi Kate." Her voice warmed, she knew me, we'd spoken 4 times in the coordination of this event. "Everything going okay in there? Did you need something?" "I'm actually outside," I said. "I need to cancel the booking." A pause. "I'm sorry, cancel?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to cancel the booking and get the deposit refunded. Tonight, if possible." I want to tell you about the silence that followed, because it was a specific kind of silence, not the silence of someone who didn't understand, but the silence of someone who understood completely and was trying to find the professional response to a situation that was not in the training manual. "Kate," she said carefully. "The event is currently in progress." "I know," I said. "The guests are inside." "I know," I said. Another pause. Is everyone okay? Is there an emergency?" "There's no emergency," I said. "My husband told me to leave his party. I thought I'd take him up on it." The silence this time was different. Shorter. When Andrea spoke again, her voice had shifted from professional brightness to something more human, the specific register of a woman who has heard a situation summarized in 1 sentence and has made a decision about it. "Okay," she said. "Where are you?" "Parking lot. East side." "I'll be out in 2 minutes," she said. Andrea was, I would estimate, 50 years old, with the bearing of someone who has managed events for a long time and has seen most things. She came out through the side exit in her venue manager blazer, assessed me in the parking lot with the quick, thorough look of a professional who is also a person, and said, "Tell me what you need." "I need to cancel the booking and get the deposit back," I said. "And I need to know how to stop the balance being charged at event end." "The balance would be charged to the card on file," she said. "Which is yours, I assume?" "Yes." "I can remove the card from the system right now," she said. "The deposit, our cancellation policy is 21 days, so technically you're inside the non-refundable window." "I know," I said. "I read the contract." She looked at me. The look of a woman doing the math of a situation. However, she said, our policy also includes provisions for circumstances outside normal parameters. I have some discretion. A pause. I'm going to refund your deposit. I looked at her. You don't have to do that. I'm aware, she said. I'm choosing to. She had her phone out, already navigating to the booking management system. I'm going to need you to be clear with me about one thing. The guests inside, are they safe? Is there anything happening in there that I need to know about? They're fine, I said. They're having a lovely party. The only thing happening in there is that my husband told his friend he'd told me to leave, and now I'm leaving, and I'm taking the financial architecture of the evening with me when I go. Andrea looked at me for a moment over her phone screen. Then, very briefly and very professionally, she almost smiled. Card removed from system, she said. Deposit refund initiated. 3 to 5 business days. She looked back up. Anything else I can help you with? Actually, I said. Do you know if the catering company has a cancellation line? The catering company did have a cancellation line. It was an after-hours number that rang through to a service coordinator named Paul, who had the resigned air of a man who spent his Friday evenings resolving exactly these kinds of situations and had made his peace with it. I explained the situation to Paul in the same terms I'd used with Andrea: booking contact, event currently in progress, need to discuss the contract. Paul said the payment had been made in full and was non-refundable per their policy. I said I understood, but that the contract had been paid by a card that was reporting unauthorized charges and I needed to initiate a dispute process, at which point Paul's tone changed in the specific way of someone who has heard the phrase unauthorized charges and knows exactly what it means in practice for his Friday evening. I want to be honest here, the charge was not technically unauthorized. I had authorized it myself. What I was communicating to Paul was that I was prepared to spend whatever time was necessary making his Friday evening more complicated, and Paul, who was a practical man, heard this message clearly. We reached an arrangement. The arrangement was that the catering company would provide a credit toward a future event rather than a cash refund, which was not ideal but was a 40% recovery on a sunk cost, and which I accepted because I am not actually someone who enjoys making other people's Fridays worse, and the point had been made. The florist was easier. The balance wasn't due until event completion, and event completion from the florist's perspective meant me signing off on the job, and I was not going to sign off on the job, which meant the balance, $420, simply wasn't going to be charged. I texted the florist directly, "Hi, this is Kate Mercer. I won't be completing the event tonight. Please do not attempt to charge the balance. I'll be in touch about returning the centerpieces or arranging pickup." The florist responded within 10 minutes, "Understood. No charge. Let us know about the arrangements." The photographer was harder. Full payment up front, no cancellation provisions, and she was inside actively working. I texted her, "Hi, it's Kate. Can you step out for a moment when you get a chance? I need to speak with you." She came out 4 minutes later, camera in hand, slightly out of breath from having been mid-action shot. I explained the situation. Not in detail, enough. She was a woman about my age, and something in my explanation produced in her the same shift I'd seen in Andrea, the rapid recalibration from professional mode to person mode. "I've already done about an hour of shooting," she said. "I know," I said. "Keep what you've shot. I don't need any of it. Consider the prepayment fair compensation for the hour's work and the booking of your time." She looked at me. "Are you sure?" she said. There might be something we can do." "I'm sure," I said. "The hour is yours. I just want you to know that going forward, the client for this job is no longer me, and any further requests for images or extensions of the shoot should be directed to Greg Mercer, who can arrange his own payment." She nodded. Slowly. With the expression of someone absorbing information she will be thinking about for some time. "Okay," she said. Okay." She went back inside. I stood in the parking lot. The night was cold, the specific October cold that arrives without warning in the early evening and makes you understand that summer is genuinely over. I had not brought a coat because I had not expected to be spending the party outside, which was, I reflected, the kind of logistical oversight I almost never made. The open bar was still running inside. Greg's 40 guests were still drinking the champagne I had selected and ordered and budgeted for, and the music I had curated was playing, and the centerpieces I had chosen were on the tables, and the birthday cake I had ordered, chocolate, for layers, his name in gold buttercream because I had remembered from a conversation 2 years ago that he had once said gold buttercream was the best, was waiting in the kitchen to be brought out at 9. The credit on my catering account meant the open bar was technically running on credit I had negotiated rather than payment Greg had made. The venue was running on goodwill Andrea had extended to me personally. The florist wasn't being paid. The photographer had been paid for an hour and been released. The cake was still there. I had paid for it in full. Greg was welcome to the cake. I stood in the October parking lot and I understood, in the particular way you understand things that have been true for a while when the specific moment of understanding finally arrives, that I was not going back in there. Not tonight. Possibly not in any of the ways that mattered. I opened my phone. I searched for hotels. I found one 4 blocks away with availability and a ground floor bar that I thought I might visit before I went to sleep. I booked it. My card. I should tell you about the 9 years. Not all of them. 9 years is too long a story to tell in a parking lot, and I am not standing in the parking lot anymore. I am a woman 11 months past that October, telling you this from a place where I've had enough time and enough distance to see the shape of the whole thing. But I should tell you enough of it. Greg and I had a marriage that looked, from the outside, like a good one. This is relevant because the outside-looking in version of your marriage is a thing you maintain, consciously or not, and the maintenance of it becomes, over time, its own kind of work. The parties you throw. The social events you show up to together. The version of yourself you present when you're out with his colleagues, or his friends, or at the family dinners where his mother asks you leading questions and you smile and answer them correctly. I was very good at the maintenance. It was, after all, professionally adjacent to what I did for a living. What was less visible from the outside was the specific dynamic that had developed somewhere around year 4 or 5, the one where Greg's confidence in the marriage had curdled, gradually, from genuine partnership into something that more resembled entitlement. The confidence that I would handle things. That the background would be managed. That the social and financial infrastructure of our shared life would continue to be produced, invisibly, by the person who had always produced it. He had stopped saying thank you somewhere around year 5. I don't mean that literally, he said the social thank you, the reflexive one, when I put dinner on the table or handled something administrative. I mean the real one. The one that acknowledges that something was done and someone did it and the doing was not automatic, it was a choice, and the choice could be made differently. He had started, around the same time, doing a thing I found difficult to name until I found the word for it, which is minimizing. The word for making small. Not in arguments, Greg was not a fighter, or not overtly. In the way he referenced my work in conversation with other people. Kate does the events thing. Kate takes care of the social stuff. The event thing that brought in more money than his salary in good years. The social stuff that maintained a network he benefited from professionally. Said in the tone of someone describing a hobby. Said as though the thing being described was pleasant and low stakes and not, in fact, the output of a professional with 15 years of experience. By year 7 I had started noticing these things in a way I hadn't before. By year 8 I had started wondering what I would do about them. By year 9 I was in the state that I think many women reach before a marriage ends, the state of having made a decision I hadn't quite named yet, that existed as a kind of readiness, a preparation, a when rather than an if. He just told me when. She's been killing the vibe all night. I already told her to leave. The already was the part that stayed with me, standing in the parking lot. Not I'm going to tell her to leave, not maybe Kate should. Already. Past tense. A decision presented to Marcus as having been made. I had been informed of my departure before I had been asked for it, which was, in a very tidy and clarifying way, the entire marriage in a single word. Already. I want to tell you what was happening inside the party while I was in the parking lot, because Greg told me later, much later, in the way of people who need to believe their narrative of events is the dominant one, what the trajectory of that evening looked like from his side. He didn't notice I was gone for approximately 40 minutes. This is the detail I have replayed more than any other, not because it hurt. By the time he told me, I was past the point where it could hurt in that particular way, but because it is so precisely illustrative of the thing I spent 9 years trying to name. 40 minutes. His wife walked out of his birthday party and he did not notice for 40 minutes. When he did notice, he assumed I'd stepped out for air, or a phone call, or one of the logistical things I was always handling. He was not alarmed, because I was the kind of person who handled things and could be relied on to return from the handling. He went back to his conversations. At the 2-hour mark, when the open bar began to close, earlier than planned, because Andrea had quietly adjusted the service schedule in a way she was entirely within her rights to do as the venue manager, he went to find me. A staff member told him the booking contact had left. He called my cell phone. I watched it ring from a hotel bar 4 blocks away where I was on my second glass of wine and a bowl of truffle fries that I had ordered specifically for myself with no consideration of anyone else's preferences, which was a minor and private pleasure I don't expect anyone to fully understand but which felt, in that moment, like an act of sovereignty. I did not answer. He called twice more. I watched the phone light up each time and put it face down on the bar and thought about the truffle fries. At some point the evening wound down the way evenings wind down when the infrastructure is missing. The photographer packed up. The catering staff cleared the remaining food. The guests, sensing whatever guests sense when a party has lost its organizing center, began to disperse. By 10:30 the venue was clearing. The cake, I was told later, had been served. A staff member had brought it out on schedule, because the kitchen runs on the kitchen schedule regardless of what's happening in the main room. I hope it was good. I spent a long time choosing it. At 11, Greg texted me, "Where are you? I think there's some issue with the venue billing." I put the phone in my bag and finished my wine and went to bed. I slept until 8, which I never do. I am a 6:30 person in the way that some people simply are, regardless of what time they go to sleep, their bodies having decided that 6:30 is the correct relationship between themselves and mornings. I slept until 8, and I woke up in a hotel room I had chosen, in a bed with sheets that were not mine, with the very specific feeling of having arrived somewhere. Not a destination. Just a somewhere. A place that was mine in the temporary but complete sense that hotel rooms are yours for the time you've paid for them. No one else's preferences in this room. No one else's stuff. A window that faced east and let in October morning light that was flat and bright and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened the night before, which I found deeply restful. I ordered room service. Coffee and eggs and toast and a small pot of orange marmalade, which I like and Greg does not and which had consequently been absent from our kitchen for 9 years. I sat in the armchair by the window and I ate my eggs and my toast with orange marmalade and I thought about what I was going to do. Here is what I did not do that morning. I did not spiral. I did not catastrophize. I did not run through the financial implications of separation in the way I knew they would need to be run through eventually, the mortgage and the joint accounts and the professional complications and the telling of people, his family, my family, the mutual friends who would have to decide what to do with the information. I would do all of that. I was fully aware it was coming and I had no illusions about how hard parts of it were going to be. I didn't do any of it that morning. I ate my eggs. I drank my coffee. I looked at the October light and I let myself have the morning. Greg called at 9:15. I answered this time, because the not answering had served its purpose, which was to make a point about what it felt like to reach for someone and find them unavailable, and the answering was the next thing. "Kate," he said. His voice had the quality I knew from the rare occasions when Greg was genuinely uncertain, a flattening of the usual confidence, a kind of careful stepping. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you." "I know," I said. "I'm in a hotel." "A hotel?" "4 blocks from the venue. I booked it last night when I left." A pause. You left?" "You told me to," I said. "I didn't," he stopped. I didn't mean it like that. I was talking to Marcus and I said something stupid and I didn't realize you were standing there and I." You told him you'd already told me to leave, I said. Past tense. Already. You'd made a decision about my presence at my own party before you'd said anything to me, and you told your friend as though it was a done thing. Silence. That's not. It was what it was, Greg, I said. I heard the words. More silence. Then, there are some issues with the billing from last night. The venue is saying the booking was cancelled. I cancelled it, I said. You, what? I cancelled the venue booking, I said. And I arranged a credit with the catering company. The florist isn't charging the balance. The photographer kept her prepayment for the hour she worked. The silence this time was different from the others. It had the quality of someone recalculating a situation they thought they understood. You did all that last night, he said. It took about 45 minutes, I said. You have a very helpful venue manager. Kate. His voice shifted, not angry, which was not quite what I expected, but something more effortful. The tone of a man trying to locate the right register for a conversation that had moved into territory he hadn't prepared for. You can't just, the party was still going on. I know, I said. I wasn't there to see it, but I understand it went fine. It went fine because everyone was confused about where you were and the bar closed early and the whole thing just kind of petered out? I said. Yes, he said. Petered out. I'm sorry about the timing, I said. And I was, genuinely, in the way that you can be sorry about the collateral of a necessary thing. I hope people still had a good time. That's not, he exhaled. The exhale of a man who has been handed a conversation he did not plan for and is trying to find his footing. Can you come home? Can we talk about this? I looked at the October light through the hotel window. My empty coffee cup. The small pot of orange marmalade, nearly finished. I'll come home today, I said. But I want you to understand something before I do. What? I'm not coming home to manage this, I said. I'm coming home to have the conversation we should have been having for about 2 years, which is about what this marriage actually is and whether either of us wants to keep doing it. I'm not coming home to smooth this over and go back to the way things were. That version of things is done. A long silence. Okay, he said. Finally. Quietly. In the tone of a man who has understood something. I'll be there by noon, I said. I hung up. I looked at the marmalade. I finished it. Greg and I separated 11 months ago. The separation has been, in the way of things that are both right and hard, exactly both of those things simultaneously. The practical work of it, the house, the accounts, the telling of people, was as complicated as I'd known it would be and also, once I was in the middle of it, more manageable than I'd feared. I am, by training and temperament, good at logistics. I had been using that skill to run someone else's life for 9 years. Turning it toward my own felt like the first genuinely sensible deployment of it in a long time. The house is on the market. It will sell quickly, it's a good house and the market is what it is, and the proceeds will be divided according to an agreement that I negotiated with the help of a lawyer who described me, at our third meeting, as the most prepared client she'd had in 2 years, by which she meant that I showed up with documents. I have always been good with documents. Greg has been, this is the most accurate word, I've considered several, subdued. Not in the way of a man who has been defeated, but in the way of a man who has had to update his picture of a situation he thought he understood. I think the parking lot moment, the 45 minutes of cancellations while the party continued inside, clarified something for him about the architecture of what he'd been living in. What the background looked like when it stopped running. We have spoken civilly about practical things. We have not spoken about the things that would require one of us to be honest in a way that is more useful to the other person than to ourselves, and I don't expect we will. This is okay. It is not every marriage that ends with the full accounting. Sometimes the accounting is private. I want to tell you about the one conversation Greg and I had that was more honest than the practical ones. It was about 3 months after the October party, over a necessary meeting about the house valuation. We had handled the business of it and we were standing in the kitchen of a house we were selling, and we had that particular kind of nothing left to discuss silence that falls when two people have finished the formal agenda and haven't yet figured out whether to fill the silence or let it be. Greg said, "The marmalade thing." I looked at him. "I don't know why I noticed it," he said. "But when I came home the day after and you'd come back and got your things, you took the marmalade. The little pot from the hotel. You brought it back and it was in the fridge. I had done this. The marmalade pot, half empty, that the hotel provided with the room service. I had wrapped it in a hand towel and put it in my bag because I am not generally a petty person, but I had paid for that room service and I wanted the marmalade." "You never bought marmalade," he said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation. "You don't like it," I said. "I know," he said. He was quiet for a moment. "I know. I didn't think about it. It wasn't there, so I assumed you didn't want it. I didn't ask." I looked at him. "I didn't ask about a lot of things," he said. "I'm aware of that now. I'm not saying it I'm just saying I'm aware." It was not an apology, not exactly. It was closer to an honest statement of fact, offered without the expectation that the fact would fix anything. I have thought about it more than the apology would have required me to think about an apology, which is probably why he said it as a fact and not as a sorry. "No," I said. "You didn't. We sold the house to a couple with a young daughter who was very interested in the kitchen tile. I hope she likes it there. It is 11 months since the October parking lot and I am living in an apartment I chose, in a neighborhood I like, with an east-facing window that gets the same flat October light I watched from the hotel. I have marmalade in the refrigerator. I have a work calendar that is entirely my own projects, organized by me for clients who are paying me directly, with no invisible labor redirected toward anyone else's comfort. I run most mornings. I have started keeping a list of things I like that I don't have to justify to anyone, which sounds like a small thing and is in fact a very large thing, in the ongoing project of remembering who I am when I'm not being infrastructure. The list includes orange marmalade, very cold October mornings, truffle fries at a hotel bar at 11 p.m., the particular satisfaction of a well-organized cancellation, the sound of a hotel room door closing behind you and knowing nobody is on the other side of it, with a list of things that need handling. I did not plan that parking lot. I did not show up to Greg's birthday party with a strategy. What I had was 9 years of invisible work, an open phone, for apps, and a venue manager named Andrea who looked at a woman in a parking lot and decided to be a person rather than a policy. The party cost me $8,905 and change. I recovered approximately $4,200 of it between the deposit refund, the catering credit, the florist balance I didn't pay, and the photographer arrangement. The remaining $4,700 I think of as the cost of 9 years of not asking for the marmalade. It was, honestly, a reasonable price. If you've been the infrastructure of someone else's life, if you've been running the background so long that the background became the only place you existed, I hope this story found you at a useful moment. You are allowed to leave the party. Even if you planned it. Even if you paid for it. Even if the bar is still running and the cake hasn't come out yet. You are allowed to pick up your phone, walk out to the parking lot, and begin. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where something small, a sentence, a look, a word someone used without thinking, made everything suddenly clear? What did you do with the clarity? I read everything. Thank you for being here. Subscribe if this was worth your time. There's always another one.